for this, and there was, I think, 3 city workshops, not terribly well attended during the pre-referendum process last fall. Just to give folks some background, the city of Ellsworth has I think a moratorium on this type of activity post the state passing recreational cannabis in, I want to say 2018? 19. And then while the state as a whole obviously supported recreational cannabis, Ellsworth was pretty close in like 50-50 on statewide legalization, and then we had it on the referendum following the workshop process, and it passed as a yes for moving forward with recreational cannabis 55-45, and the question is, what does that mean, and how does that work? How many? What's the process for where the council and the city would like them? What kind of regulatory environment do we want to put in place to ensure that things are safe and equitable? And so I know the team has been working on that for a while, and they got a great agenda here as kind of a first step so we can start having some of these conversations. I know talking with Sarah and Robert, they'll go through things, but I think a lot of this is just to get the council's opinion and the planning board opinion on some of these broader subjects so that they have some better information as they develop a request for proposals for this and a regulatory framework to guide this. So this first conversation is really more kind of a zoom out. Here's the timeline of how we feel like we can move forward and to kind of flesh out the general idea of the council and the concerns they may have that they want us to dive deeper on. So with that, I'll hand it over to Robert.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Robert Grant, the Code Enforcement Officer. And the reason we're having this combined session between the City Council and the Planning Board is because one of the chief ways to regulate recreational cannabis use in the city is through zoning, and that would mean it goes in our land use ordinance. And the Planning Board has purview over the land use ordinance. Anything we do has to get an up or down from them first, and then ultimately it falls on the City Council to approve it or not. So it's a 2-step process. That's why we're all in the room together tonight. So yeah, the first thing I'd like to talk about, I guess, is a little bit is the background. Charlie touched on the fact that we actually had 4 meetings, workshops that were not well attended, I will admit. I was involved with 2 of them, and the other 4 all 4 of them were handled by Matt, the previous city planner. But in November we did pass the referendum 55-45, and that's why we're here today. I mean, it's taken us a while to get it on the schedule, but we had a lot of other stuff come turnover with staff, and then the budget season kicked into high gear, which was the priority, and I think we did a really great job with that. But anyway, the city staff worked on what we've been calling the heat map that shows a 500-foot buffer around schools and daycares, parks, and churches. State law requires that there be a minimum of 500-foot buffer around all schools, from the property line of all schools, that you cannot have a recreational cannabis store in. We are also showing other places like daycares, which you can make an argument would fall under the school. Parks, where public parks, where families are going to be, lots of high concentrations of underage people will be there, and as well as churches are a likely place where the people that go to those churches probably wouldn't want this sort of business in the area. Also, a fair amount of kids go to churches, so those are the 4 places that are outlined on this map that we thought we would show you where the stores can't go. And I think that leads, if you look at the heat map, that leads you to 3 areas really in the city that where would make logical sense to look at for initial recreational retail cannabis shops. That would be the Bucksport Road, the Bangor Road, and I think the best candidate, in my personal opinion, is the High Street, Myrick Street corridor. It's already the commercial zone. We have 3 to 4 million tourists that go through there every summer. Would allow the most visible area for those sort of shops. And, sure.
Can I ask a question as you work through that? The scale of the map is kind of small to look at Main Street. Is there a Main Street?
Main Street's on there,
Part
but it
that-
is a giant blob of schools and
Well,
daycares.
that's
and-
my
yeah.
hope. My question is there a part of the Main Street or the downtown area?
Not if
that-
you use the 1,000-foot buffer.
But we're using the 500 foot.
If we wanted to go with the 500-foot buffer, there's a very small area, basically right across from Franklin Street.
Can we restrict to, could we just say just commercial zone?
We could, yeah, that's part of the land use aspect. We could restrict it to the commercial zone if we wanted to.
I mean, I bring it up because it's a retail, regardless of what you think of it, anybody thinks of it, it's a retail space. We want to promote the downtown. Is it possible as we're working through? I get the other values for being up on High Street, but.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to use our recommendation of adding churches to the list for places where it can't
I
be.
don't want to change any of that. I
Okay.
just wanted to know geographically with what you
There's
said.
a
I can't-
very small
It looks
area.
like there's a space there.
Very small area of Main Street, downtown Main Street that would work.
Okay.
Well, Rob, when you talk about daycares, you talk about, state licensed daycares?
Yes, anything we had in the property cards that were listed as operating a daycare is listed on there.
And those licensed daycares could be anywhere from 2 kids to 20 kids or 30 kids, right?
Yeah.
So I think, the state law, according to your memo, requires a 1,000-foot buffer around pre-existing schools and marijuana facilities. But then you're also talking about the state law, say you have to have a buffer with schools, preschools, daycares, churches, and public parks, or the state law just mandate
It's just schools.
the schools?
Not parks.
No, just schools. And the state will allow you to go down to 500 feet. And that's what we're showing on the map is the 500-foot buffer.
500 feet buffer even for the
Just
schools?
schools, yeah. The only thing that they mandate is schools.
But, I think one of the first things to do is decide whether we stay with the 1,000-foot buffer for schools or go to 500, and whether you want that buffer around preschools, daycares, churches, and public parks. I think that's probably one of the first things you have to decide. If 500 foot, if the thought is maybe to have one in the downtown area, and by putting that 500-foot buffer on daycares, and you're totally eliminating downtown, do you want to include the buffer on daycares? Keep in mind, I kind of relate, the retail marijuana with an establishment that sells alcohol. I don't see there's really any difference. So why have more stringent controls over retail marijuana than what is currently in place for, retail, either a bar or Hannaford's or, a package store like that?
Yeah, I think this is maybe where some good robust argument, like there's some key pieces here, like, my opinion, for what it's worth, is, if I had my druthers and the dictatorial city manager one, I'd say commercial district only, let's do one. See how this goes. Treat it not like a liquor store, but like a casino or like a New Hampshire-owned liquor store, where, it's a sin tax essentially, and we're gonna take this slow. I don't wanna see this end up like, where it's a broad ordinance, 500 feet, and there could be 15, 20, 30 pot shops in Ellsworth. To me, that's not in line with this community. I wouldn't want to see one downtown. I'd want to see just a single available shop open in the commercial district, ideally in that undeveloped parcels along the WS development, which I think would be a really ideal place for it. And the only thing that Ellsworth gets, because we don't get a cut of the sales tax revenue because of the way it's different than other states that design it, but the state gets all of that tax revenue. We only get the valuation increase. So trying to get, which is why I'd say like treating it like a casino in Massachusetts. We're like, hey, we're giving a golden ticket to an operator here, and the competition should be who's going to build the most like tourist-friendly, largest, like best new increase in property values or a new development in that corridor. That's to me the benefit for Ellsworth here, is that we have more of a tourist destination, a single, and the people that are going to want this golden ticket. I mean, if you Google Boston to Acadia, you know, your one pot shop right off the street would be here. You know, I did a Google Maps on that. You get off the Massachusetts, like you'd either have to do a reroute to Bangor, go further. So this is going to be a highly valuable one. And some of the research I've done, like how do we get it so it's not just a bunch of strip mall type small pot shops, but that the pot shop owner that wants to give the best proposal that's going to be the biggest valuation increase. And then if we feel like we need more, we'd go on for there. So it's really trying to, at least in the near term, create the most restrictive framework for cannabis, and then we can kind of, you know, see how that goes. If we need more going forward, we would allow for that, but it wouldn't be like sort of a free-for-all, and especially in the near term. But that's my opinion. There's.
So you envision it like an RFP almost for like, I get my pot license to put my store someplace? Is that where you're going?
Yeah, so there'd be we'd put out an RFP, restrict it to the commercial district, see what comes in, and if there's two great spots that would go in there, then we can give 2 licenses. If there's just one, then we pick the best one and kind of move from there, as opposed to just having if we get 50 applications and here's all the places in Ellsworth they can go. I wouldn't want to see a lot of pot shops here. I feel like having one.
Is there any evidence that there are, like if you allow one weed establishment that, you know, 37 of them follow in the same spot or the same town, or does, you know, I mean, does that work that way? I mean, I don't know.
I'll just share my experience living in Western Maine for a year and a half. The Route 26 that goes up to the ski areas, it is astounding the number of cannabis shops that are there. And I haven't gone back in a couple of years, so I don't know if they all survived, but they definitely, it's the same. It's a corridor of recreational from states where it's not as easily accessible as we're willing to make it. But I'm like in a 10-mile stretch, there are 5, something like that. I may have the numbers off, but it was enough, so it's like, how many of these do we actually need? So
So you don't think the market basically tamps that down? Like, you
It
know,
may
I mean, I
in
could buy
time.
10,
It
you
may
know,
in
but
t-
the
right.
market only says 5, I mean, you're
Well,
only
and
gonna get
that's
5.
that's what I wasn't there long enough to see about, over time, the numbers come down? But there were enough so that it like impacted the feel of Route 26 for what that's worth, going through those communities on your way to
Legally, can we
ski.
do that kind of, looking at you, Pat? Legally, can we do that kind of, you know, like, let's have a proposal for one, and then if it works, let's have another one or not, or is that
Yeah, we're pretty much in control here.
to do that sort of thing?
Yeah, you can regulate cannabis businesses in any number of ways. How many they are, where they are, how big they can be. We can't be any less strict than the state's requirements, but we can be more strict. So, yeah, I think it's really up to us on how we want to do it. I look to some, like Brewer has recently done it. I think Brewer's a good model. It seems to me, I mean, I haven't gone looking for all of them, but there's a few of them on the main drag, as in, if you, instead of getting off, going 395, you keep going. There's a few there, and it's in a kind of commercial type.
You're on Wilson Street, right?
Yeah, Wilson
Okay.
Street. Okay, yeah, Wilson Street. That's the name. Yeah, and there's a few there, and one's next to a Subway, and you know, they kind of just fit in to that area. And I hear what Charlie's saying about, you know, if we can get them to develop, you know, the Myrick Street area, that'd be great. But in my opinion, there's retail space. I think, for what it's worth, I think we should limit it to High Street, up through the commercial, district, commercial zone, and I would start with 2. And just because I think it's better rather than just having one who kind of monopoly, you know, having at least 2, then they have to compete a little bit with each other. Again, this is somewhat kind of just pulling this out of my head, but, and if you look at Brewer, I think there's like 2 or 3, but 3 of them there.
And what, there's 3 or 4 in Bangor?
3 or 4 in Bangor, I think, yeah, I mean, you
And
can
they're
go.
kind of scattered around though.
Yeah, they're scattered around, but to the point I think we're all making is I don't want to see it, you know, yeah, and I agree with John that it's, you know, cannabis and alcohol, right? They're controlled, you know, for adults. I see them as similar in that sense as far as impacts on the community, but I don't want to see them near in the main mall, right, in the Mill Mall, you know, between all the schools. And I think High Street makes the most sense. We already have the infrastructure. There's retail space in High Street that could be developed, or you know, infill retail. You can pull off at Hannaford's or Shaw's and get your groceries, go to your cannabis shop, get that, hit Global Beverage on your way into town, and you're got a great vacation, right? So,
But it turns out that the users are, they go slowly, right? But the users are really, it's really an in and out kind of operation.
yes,
I mean,
yeah.
they don't go and stay and get blasted.
Well, you're not allowed, there's no,
Right,
you're
allowed
not
to,
permitted
right.
to use
So,
it. Yeah.
so the parallel to liquor establishments is, some of it's valid, some of it's not valid. Because, you know, most liquor licenses and so forth are for bars, right, where you stay. But anyway, but there was at least one study that said that, you know, the average dwell time at a dispensary or whatever you call them, I just call them weed places, is about 15 minutes. And the thing about downtown, although I agree with you, like, it might be a good place, but basically it's drive in, get your weed at whatever time of the day and motor on. And so you know, parking requirements are different for retails than regular retail establishments versus weed and the dwell time and all that. So there's a whole bunch of things that are different about it. But from that perspective, I think that High Street is in fact a pretty good location in general.
It's aptly named.
And there is that. You know, and I can see that in the advertisements for downtown Ellsworth now. Get high on High Street.
Yeah, don't get high on High Street.
But don't get high.
Get the stuff to get high on High Street. Yeah, so, but you
But
know,
and
it's
the other
really,
thing
it's
is
our,
that-
it's in our, it's really our, how we want.
Sure, okay. And the state must have some pretty good data on, you know, whether or not places have, you know, led to this being, you know, like Pot Alley or whatever, versus, you know, 1 year, 1 there. Wouldn't they have that data?
The
I asked
OCP.
somebody.
Yeah,
We had a workshop 2 years ago with the Office of Cannabis Policy in Maine, and they had a lot of data. I can't remember a lot of it, but
But they had, but they had all kinds of standard legislation for locals and lots of information.
yeah,
It was a
they're,
valuable
they're
resource.
used to speaking to communities who have concerns, so they're ready for answers to questions like that. Is it gonna corrupt the youth, et cetera? They have some stats and data to kind of counteract those arguments.
it'd be great to get them to either the June or July
Yeah.
sessions, to have that, you know, as a, if they're available. Because, yeah, and, you know, to your point, Rick, I think if you look at like Portland, they have a lot of them, and it seems like no matter where you go in Portland, you'll see 1 or 2. And, you know, that's Portland. I think here, I agree, personally, I don't want to see them all throughout the town. I think it makes a lot of sense to have them in our commercial corridor where we already have the parking infrastructure and, sewer and water and all that's there, and, I think, again, it's just my opinion, but I would imagine that they would be, in place with other commercial retail businesses, there might be some synergy there. Again, people are, we're a service center, and it's not just tourists, it's people coming from, we'll be the only retail cannabis town in, other than like Southwest Harbor and.
Bucksport, Southwest,
Does Bucksport have it?
they got one?
No,
I
Bucksport
think,
has
I
one?
think
it's,
it's, I think
it's medical.
medical.
Yeah, there's no recreational,
Yeah, and that's.
nothing in Belfast.
So it's just Southwest.
Yeah,
Southwest Harbor,
I
so-
mean, we're gonna get, Machias West and, all over the place. So I think we'll see it coming in, and again, like, we're set up to handle that, in the High Street corridor. But, that's my
Chief,
thought.
have you, in your research, I know you contacted other towns, like how many are in different towns, Bangor, or?
Yeah, so
Okay, good.
So when we initially had these meetings, I kind of called some area departments that actually had some establishments in their cities. And I think Bangor has like 11, Brewer had 3 or 4, and Newport had a couple. So those are the main ones because they were kind of in our area, our size, so. And every one that I spoke to said that as far as in a law enforcement perspective, they don't even, they rarely go get calls to them. It's just like another business, so it's not, I don't see it being any extra work for us, no matter how many you have.
I think one of the, to kind of that point on being the only one, and then I know Ellsworth is the highest retail spending per capita in the state. I've heard that the Walmart and the Home Depot are some of the highest grossing Walmarts and Home Depots in the state, that the Irving station is like 1 or 2 for highest most in the state. So in some ways, one of my reasons for thinking about one and treating it like the casinos when I was in Massachusetts, they had that process for, this is a golden ticket. And, getting, hey, create the best, most cool, increase the property value, which is the taxes for us. That's how we're gonna get something that's not gonna be like a strip mall pot store, but something like in Portland, they have this place called the Seaweed Co., which is a much more like, there's one other place we were doing the research called Grass Monkey, which is like an art museum type quality that becomes like a tourist attraction in of itself. And more importantly, like if you're gonna put some shovels into WS, that's scoring, because that's a big value for the city. So can you kind of 2 bird, 1 stone this, knowing that we're gonna be offering a golden ticket or 2 golden tickets, so your proposal, and if we get 5 or 6 developments, your proposal better be, a pretty big, investment in a really good building that's gonna be a great, in that category of a pot store that can get some development in areas that we want it. Like, can we do that? Or is it more, with 2 or 3, and can you do that, Patrick? Can you like,
We can say 2.
say 2, and
And we
then
could say.
council
in
approved?
this building and in that building. We could get that narrow.
Oh, wow.
if we wanted to.
Well, hours of operation.
We could
you limit
say
that.
12 to 1 PM, like, we can say, as long as we're not any less restrictive than the state.
And can we have it more of like that was one of my other questions here was like, how much does council want to be involved in this process, right? Most other ones is Ebony comes in with the new business license and you kind of see it, we kind of move forward, but is this one that I think the council might, we might want to actually bring the proposals, this is the scoring, this is what staff's recommendation is, but even more than just a kind of council meeting for that, kind of like a pre-meeting on what I don't know.
I don't, that doesn't feel right to me. I'm kind of trying to think through the mechanics of that first golden ticket option of like, we get 5 RFPs and now the council and the planning board are going through these and kind of picking and choosing what we think is the best. That feels kind of messy to me and like a lot of work and involvement with really nebulous stuff. Well, these guys have a good record, but, and they've got one other store, or they're gonna spend this much, or they're gonna build here, and we're kind of comparing different proposals. That's just, maybe a small committee, that would make sense, but in my mind, I think we should set a number, we should set 2 or 3 and a couple stipulations of, you've gotta put this much value added, whatever, funds into improving a building or building new or something. Just set a couple things that are written down, they're in the code, total number 3, say, and then just kinda like let the market do what it will, as Steve might say, free market. But have these things written down for
The
so it's not a
scoring
bid
criteria,
process. It's-
design,
it goes
increased
through code,
evaluation.
It goes through the planning board, and we've already written down all the
I
stipulations.
know you guys were talking about it a few minutes ago. Bucksport didn't have any, but I think they're in the process of having a couple built there now. So I don't know if anybody's talked to anybody over on Bucksport Council or planning board, but I don't know what they've got established, but I'm pretty sure that they're building a couple over there now.
Interesting. I'm meeting with Sue next month, so I'll see if they're rec or if they're more medical.
I mean, I would be against 1. I'm kind of focused in on 3. I think there should be some competition. I think if you have 1, you run the risk of that monopoly maybe just terrible, being run terribly, getting shut down. We've talked about the High Street corridor, but we specifically talked too about Myrick Street, and I would caution against that, because if you're talking about a specific area, I mean, Myrick Street's owned by one company. So are you gonna restrict that, medical marijuana facilities in Ellsworth to one landowner? I think I'm not a lawyer, but I think you're gonna run into a problem by saying, okay, these facilities have to be built on WS property, which is what Myrick Street is. Nobody else owns property on Myrick Street other than WS. I mean, that may be a great location, and maybe they'd wanna do something, but they haven't wanted to do anything since, it was developed.
Yeah, and there may be a sin covenant or something on that area too. Like when they develop those areas, I don't want to be next to a strip club or a alcohol store, these types of things. I'm not quite sure that's even possible, but.
If you go the RFP route and, okay, you're the winner and, you get to do the weed store, how does that work over time? I mean, what happens if that goes out of business or whatever? But you've kind of almost spot zoned, this is the zone right here, this building for a weed store. I mean, does that run into trouble? I mean, and what happens if that one goes, belly up? Does somebody else have to go into that same space, or does the license float, or how does that work?
Whatever we want, I mean, if we.
Wow, really? That seems bad, but okay.
Yeah, I think to your point, Rick, some municipality, like Portland again, which I know is kind of the extreme example for Maine, but they had this really convoluted scoring system because they knew they were gonna have a ton of people wanting to do it. And there was a lawsuit, and I think it was just kind of messy. As I understand it, in Brewer, they basically just kind of said, here, 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 and here, this is where cannabis stores can go in.
And were those bigger areas, or were those a building?
I think they're pretty narrow. I think it's limited to like sections of buildings, or again, and it'd be great to pick, I don't want to, I may be wrong or not have all the facts, but like I think it was along those lines of like just picking limited areas and then saying, if you can build here, and then, I don't know if they limited by the numbers, or they just in essence limited the amount of places so much it de facto limits the numbers, which might be a way to go, because then we're not picking winners and losers, we're just saying, hey, if you can get a lease on this property and come in and satisfy all our other requirements, you can open a business here. And that's how we would treat like a liquor store or something.
But it would seem to me that, Patrick, that there need to be, again, in terms of the numbers we're talking about, I like your idea, first of all. But second, in terms of the kinds of numbers we're talking about, if you said, as you gestured, this area, and there's possibility for 3 properties there, would we put 3 stores there?
Well, we could also do a limit. You can't put one cannabis store within 1,000 feet of another one. So we
Okay.
could basically say, this section of this road, this section of the road, this section, and, you know, or whatever number we come up with, and say, these are the only places these cannabis stores can go, and oh, by the way, you can't be within another 1,000 feet of another one. So then that kind of just, you know,
But isn't that what I'm trying to get at, isn't that a way of restricting the number of stores in the area?
it is.
Because
Without
talk
having to
about
pick
Portland
winners and
these
losers.
Other towns and cities, we aren't that big, you know, in terms of area. So we could, I think, benefit in terms of any income we might get from saying one on the 1A corridor, let's say, and one on the High Street corridor. And that's it. Now, it can be over here or over there or over there, but that's where, that's where we make the distinction and draw the line.
You know, I think that's like what income we get and what the benefit is, I think is the kind of the interesting part about this, is like really the only income benefit is the valuation increase, whether they increase the property value of a current business or they build new, which is why to me the opportunity here, which probably won't come again with a type of business like this, like we can't force anybody to build a WS development. I've had a few conversations with them, like I can't get Olive Garden to be like that. But for something like this, if you're restricting an area, like, wow, you may have to pay a higher rent to do something there because of what they charge, but it'll be so darn worth it to you to be there because you're gonna have this golden ticket and we're finally gonna have some shovels in WS after 20 years. Like, we're not gonna have an opportunity for that. Now, we're gonna keep pushing. There's other ways for WS, and we've had 2 or 3 conversations already with them, and we'll keep pushing that, but
What if we picked 2 areas that weren't WS, and then picked WS, and so, or whatever number, right?
yeah.
And basically saying, and then, so anyone that wanted to open a cannabis store on that property, by de facto has to build it. And then there might be 1 or 2 other locations where they can go into existing retail space, but we kind of have the, you know, that one, so only folks that are capable of actually constructing a store, if that were to be incentivizing for them.
Yeah.
So I want to raise 2 points. One about WS property. This may be a unique situation where they will actually have the revenue to be able to justify the rents that are being paid there. And the other point you had raised, and I wonder if there's data, is if it is a new building built there, will that bring more businesses that also know that they're gonna be recognizing significant income? So it's not we know the relationship or the what's offered on those sites is a challenge, but this may be an opportunity where businesses can meet the challenge.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna be a limited opportunity to address that market. So that's interesting, and to finally get some new life out there would be a huge benefit for Ellsworth. I just want to, before we walk away from the downtown, and I'm not advocating for it, but now is the time to tease out all of the possibilities, and whether it's Main Street or the downtown. But one of the advantages, if you talk to people who, well, we all care about Main Street and the downtown, is the volume of cars that are gonna go by High Street anyways versus what can we do to divert a small number of them to Main Street. It's not just the point about 15 minutes at that store is a good point, but if they also go to, let's say, a sweets shop, or, for instance, there are plenty of places to get food.
7-Elevens are good.
So,
Beer and pizza?
is it an opportunity to also get some traffic to come to Main Street that maybe wouldn't otherwise? And I'm not advocating, this is the time, I think, to play with all the possibilities, and then we start
Well, I'm just,
narrowing, particularly if we're looking at 2 or 3, which I support more than 1.
what, and on that point, Nancy, that we do have the one medical store already on Main Street. And as I understand it, as when adult use or recreational come in, that a lot of the medical stores actually shift because it's no longer, you don't have to be a patient, have a card. You can get anyone coming from anywhere that's 21. So one thought is that we could, we could allow that store, if they wanted to convert to a adult use facilities,
I had
kind of
wondered how that
grandfather, we
works.
could
Yeah.
grandfather that location, and then, so that's an option.
I'm not
My
as,
understanding is that there's a distinction in pricing between the medical stores and the commercial.
I don't, which one's cheaper? I don't know.
Medical.
Medical.
The one he goes to.
Yeah.
My favorite store.
why don't we take a field trip there right now?
Those are differences in, I think, lab testing requirements
Right.
for each. So.
Yeah, and that could all change too, though. The state could eventually say, no, we're gonna, 'cause it is kind of bizarre that medical doesn't have to be tested, but
Yeah.
adult use does, and I don't know. So that's just a thought that we could like grandfather that location if they wanted to convert. I don't know. I mean, we already have and then we have the dispensary, we have Curaleaf, and that's just medical. And I wouldn't be surprised if they are looking to switch either.
Well, that's kind of like, not the nightmare, but like, yeah, then there's zero value add as a
Yeah.
property tax, right? That if we allow that to happen, it just becomes, we're adding this piece and we're not getting any of the property valuation increase. So could
I
you,
wouldn't necessarily discount the permitting. That's another lever.
Yeah, I
we
was
have.
wondering
That's
about
the-
licensing fees and
Which
permitting.
we have license fees for businesses, but there are some towns that charge like
should be unique.
$15,000, $20,000, $25,000 a year for
That-
yeah, I think there was like 45, I think was the highest, and I think about 15, 25 for our size.
That was another point I was waiting to chime in on. Yeah, we have the opportunity to, through licensing fees and permitting, to get a little extra value out of it, not just the value added to the property itself. But the property would be the main way we get the value out of these
I
establishments.
could, oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, I mean, from the municipal side, yeah, that's the only way we get the value, right? But as far as the broader economy, the idea being, if this is a draw, it comes in and people shop at other stores, it, lifts, creates jobs and those people, buy things and, but yeah, so I think if Curaleaf just changed the sign to adult use, whatever, right, then there's really no value there, but,
And maybe that's in like the scoring is just, the organizations that are gonna either build new or invest and increase can be scored higher by, as part of the process, which would sort of by nature discourage just swapping out one place in a strip mall or to become another place.
I have a question that relates to citing that will show my complete ignorance on this topic. Is there an odor issue outside of stores? I've never actually been in one.
no.
I
And
know
it's-
there isn't with the medicinal here in town, but,
No, and there are odor regs with the state that they have to adhere to.
Okay.
And typically the odor is with the cultivation,
Mhm.
where it's being grown, that needs the most odor control.
right, okay.
The stores, it's all been processed off-site and packaged and, then they bring it in, so
Okay.
but we can also have odor, we can have odor controls and where, you can't have the odor go outside the building, and have a ventilation system that limits that.
We don't have any at Maine Organics.
Apparently, well, we have an ordinance now, though.
That would apply to this business as well as any
Yeah,
other.
the ordinance that you just passed a few months ago would apply to.
I just didn't know if it
retail
would be an
cannabis.
issue, if you're, again, drove by them, never went in one, never parked in the parking lot, so I don't know if,
It's
I just know it's a very unique and perhaps unpleasant smell.
I went past it and smelled it the other day, actually downtown. I was like, oh yeah, this place is like, was grand, and then remembered the grandfathered in story and was kind of wondering how we deal with that. For my druthers, as you all know well now, it's kind of one and take it very slow with this and just kind of see it. And I wouldn't have wanted one downtown at all. And just because you kind of just, yes, it might not be there,
Again, I'm
but
not advocating for it, I think we need to tease these things out and then pick what we're
I
gonna
think it would
advocate.
make sense to have something along with odor. I mean, if you go up to Curaleaf, I've been to AT&T, Curaleaf's right next door, and you can't smell it, but I mean, there's other locations that you drive by and it's like, okay, there's a pot store here someplace. But all the stuff for these stores, I mean, there's no manufacturing, there's no processing. So
Okay.
all the material is brought in on site and in packages and stuff, but I think you need to have that flexibility to have, a smell ordinance just in case, you have a problem with it.
You don't even need to, sorry,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be a separate ordinance, it can just be, because part of this, there's
I mean, it could be
kind of
right
two
in the-
controls,
this
right?
ordinance.
There's land use controls and then there's licensing controls. So land use is like where they go and setbacks and all that. But then the licensing would be like, okay, if you wanna operate this business, you have to satisfy all these things and signage requirements and, we don't want it to be, attractive to children or things of that nature, but and then also hours of operation, all of
Lighting.
that, lighting, and then part of that is then odor control, and that is just saying, hey, you have to maintain this business so that if I'm standing in front of your building, I don't smell cannabis.
Yeah, I don't see that as I see it as a concern, but not as a problem.
Yeah.
If you
It's-
put that in the ordinance or whatever, it's there, and Rick has told me many times that there's no odor concern.
I guess I would ask the chief again, or Rob, I mean, I think I think you guys dealt with some licensing in the last month, and I believe Curaleaf has $1,000 fee for their license, if I'm not mistaken.
It's handled by the clerk's office, so I'm not too sure what their license fee is.
I think it was
I think it's, yeah.
$1,000. And although, as a taxpayer, homeowner, I like generating revenue, however, I'm not so sure I like the idea. If Curaleaf has $1,000 fee, if you have a recreational marijuana, well, just because other towns charge them $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, we're gonna suck, the blood out of them, it's not fair, I don't think. I mean, it's a business, just like Curaleaf, just like Hannaford, just like any other business. So I'm not so sure that, I mean, that's obviously, your decision. I mean, I would propose that, a recreational store would have the same fee as Curaleaf. I mean, one thing is, what inspections do you guys do, code, police? I mean, you think you're gonna be doing for a recreational? I mean, I know when I was chief, I mean, the medical marijuana thing was pretty much governed by the state. We couldn't do anything. I don't know if it's still like that now or not, but, what would you anticipate doing for any inspections on recreational or, staff time or?
I remember Fire Chief Scott in one of our meetings described, the only difficult thing that he knew of was for manufacturing. There was like some butane process
Right.
of extraction that required some fire control, but recreational wouldn't necessitate that.
I don't see us being involved in any type of inspection. I mean, obviously, if there's a problem with something, we would go there to investigate, but, I think you're talking about the numbers of, worried about the numbers of store. I mean, those guys that run those shops know what they're doing. They're gonna go by what the market will produce. I mean, I don't think, if you offer those, if you put those fees in and you have legitimate people, they're gonna pay those fees. You're gonna have a building that doesn't produce smell. They're gonna be a legitimate business. I mean, I think if you don't, I don't know what the fees are, but the lower the fee, it's like you're gonna attract more people. You might have the ones that you don't wanna deal with.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's like the higher fee also just
It's a threshold.
threshold and what you're getting here in Ellsworth. If you go up Route 1 up to, Machias, there's a couple of those towns where you just pass and there's like 10 little recreational shacks, shops, and they have signs for, buy 1,000 joints for $50. I mean, it's literally like that. We wouldn't want that type of business and that kind of being but we could let the market just have that, right? Build them big, build them small, build them this. But it's like, no, this is, we're gonna introduce a regulatory environment that keeps it a little, and to your point, Nancy, I could see, I was kind of thinking of the no downtown, but as the swap of that place, I don't think, if you would invite some more tourists. If there was a recreational cannabis shop, and there already is one there that's in the medical, I actually could see that bringing some people to do a little quick ride off of Main Street, and they would hang around a little more than just go there.
They charge their EVs.
Charge their EVs.
If one of the open areas, we say, within this circle on High Street, within this circle, Bucksport Road, that could pull people through who want to try the other one, or who maybe it looks closer on their
The
maps
GPS
as they're
takes
coming
them,
in,
yeah.
they go through down Main Street to the Bucksport Road to that shop, or vice versa. Maybe there's not one on Main Street, but surrounding Main Street would pull people.
Again, we can be,
Traffic would be bad, I guess.
yeah, but we can be so prescriptive. We can just really, we could just be like, this building if we wanted to. And obviously
And you
there's,
can really do that, huh?
yep.
Wow,
Um,
that seems so wrong.
I think that would be, what would be helpful is, again, I don't know if it's the community workshop or the second joint session with the council and planning board,
He
but
did say joint session.
it's on the thing. It's more fun that way. Is to get members of the cannabis industry here.
Yeah.
And I have been approached, last year I was approached by their like lobbying group about, you know, hearing that this was going on and all that. So there's folks I could reach out to, see if they wanted to come. One of them is the owner of Brothers Cannabis and Brewer and a few others. And then one of them is like the main lobbyist for that organization. He's with Main Street Solutions. I could reach out to them and see if they would come, or if there's any other people.
Well, the state guys that.
And then state, well, yeah,
they-
not just industry, but then the state, if we get the state to come, and obviously, and anyone would be invited. But I think having industry to talk, I think they could answer some of these questions or what they've seen. Obviously, the industry's gonna be pro, no, you should
Sure.
put them everywhere and all that.
Remember, make it as cheap as possible.
Yeah, but I think it's important to have that voice in the room. Then the state, if we can get, and then especially if you have the state there, they can, well, this is what we've seen. I think that would help us make a better informed decision.
Patrick, I would add to that, if it's just two, the two existing businesses in town.
Yeah, let's invite them.
Ask them, or do they have intention, are they thinking?
Mhm.
I mean, honor people who are already investing in Ellsworth by getting their opinions as we go through it.
I'm wondering if there's like the anti as well. And I know we passed it 55, 45 for recreational, but what does that mean? And how do we also do it in a way that, 45% of people in the city of Ellsworth said, no, I don't want to see this type of activity here.
When do public hearings plan?
And probably not until we are passing the typical public hearing process.
But we could still open
I
these
was
to
gonna
the
say,
public to just invite public
If
input.
I think it would be good to have those kind of folks here to say some stuff. But I think specifically though, to answer questions as well. So I think they need to come, I think we need to have a set of questions to ask these people, resolve this, or help us resolve this thing right now, as opposed to just, gee, make a pro or anti, presentation. It just doesn't get enough detail, I don't think. And I think if you ask them with a specific set of questions that you give to them in advance, so that you, like, this is where our concern is, and how do you deal with that, whatever.
Well, I think that's maybe what the community workshop could be in June. And I think I don't know if people are taking notes, but we've already generated a fair amount of questions here tonight. And if we can create a list and have it ready for June, if we can find a date in June where all these people, we can at least get a few of these folks to come. I think that would be, and again, June, it could be June or it could be early July.
Whatever.
And we could, I think the idea is that we want to have this done by September. I think ideally before the next election, it was last year, but that would be my preference, is we have it done by the early fall, so then these businesses could potentially open up in like next spring or something. But yeah, I think the community workshop, right, the community, we want the existing businesses, people that are against it, people that are for it, the industry itself, the state if we got that crowd, I think then we would have the most informed discussion we could have that then would spur us to, okay, we come back here for another session like this, and like, all right, what do we think this ordinance should look like? And then you guys do your process and then kick it to us.
I've got a question that gets away from site location, but as this has been rumbling around, I've wondered about what we can do related to ownership. For instance, if we had 2 or 3, I would want them owned by different entities, not LLCs that are all intermingled, but truly separate ownership. And I guess within the RFP, there'd have to be some kind of showing their financial credibility, whether, I don't know what it would be, not be a bond, but something.
A bank
Um,
typically asks for a bank, and the bank says, yeah, this organization has sufficient funds to
Okay.
start this business.
But I think in particular, however many there are, I would want to see independently owned. I don't know that we can dictate that they be Maine-based, but you mentioned, it rumbled around again, because when we mentioned the casino, it's like that was supposed to be great Maine-based businesses, and, you know, they're located in Maine and they create jobs here, but,
We can't dictate them to be Maine-based.
I know.
That's
Yeah, they tried that, didn't
that
they?
constitution
violated the
thing.
dormant commerce clause, and they actually brought suit against the state, and, yeah.
But if we, at the very least, if we make sure, as best we can, that it be 3 separate ownerships, so that there really is competition offered.
Pretty sure we can
Municipal
do that.
antitrust,
Huh?
a little municipal antitrust, right here and there.
Exactly, we're trust busters. Yeah, I believe we can do that.
And, I mean,
believe
because
we-
that's one of the goals.
As
we're
long as we
talking
don't
about.
say they have to be from Maine,
I
we just
know,
say
I
they're
know.
different ownership groups.
The Department of Agriculture for a while was not at all enforcing, but had a rule that CBD products, value-added CBD products sold in Maine had to be produced or packaged in Maine. I think that's still the case. It's,
Oh.
if you look on shelves, you'll also see out-of-state stuff because nobody's enforcing it, but potentially there's some regulation we could have that's like, maybe we also support Maine cannabis growers.
Well, the cannabis has to be grown in Maine, because then it's still illegal federally, so if you cross over
Cross state
state
lines,
lines.
yeah.
Oh, so that is already state.
It's, well, it's
Right.
just, yeah, because you can't grow marijuana in New Hampshire or Canada
great.
and sell it, because then you're going across a federal border, and
Cool.
it becomes a federal crime.
So one more question.
You can have license for-
Thinking maybe 5 or 10 years in the future, because I think when we talk about these 3, it's gonna be for a certain period of time. You know, we're not saying that that's forever. But, so looking out that far on the horizon, what do they call the public places where you are allowed to gather and enjoy your cannabis?
Not allowed.
I know that.
They
What are
used to
they
be called
called?
social clubs.
Social clubs. There's a name for something like that, and I
Mhm.
hear rumblings occasionally that there is an interest at the state level of making those legal. And do we factor that in at all, where we want these located? Like, if a retail spot were to evolve into a smoking club, is there a place that makes more sense? I think, you know, right now, the comparison really is closer to Global Beverage, that it's where you buy the stuff, it's not where you sit and drink it. So this is where you buy it.
Although they just changed the license.
Kitty provision.
Or Katie Provisions.
Oh,
Yeah,
Canadian
yeah,
provision,
yeah.
right, sorry.
Okay.
I just think of those as one.
Sure, well,
So it's another, you know, teasing out all of the possible things that could happen here. Might they eventually evolve into a smoking club or a social club? And does that impact where we think we would want to locate these?
I don't think they could evolve without permission from the
Oh,
city.
I know that it's illegal right
Yeah.
now, but we're setting policy that's gonna impact Ellsworth for decades on where these things are, at least these first ones. So do we think about if that would ever happen? And again, this is about as wide open as it's gonna get, and then we start getting narrower with each meeting, I think, getting towards an actual.
Yeah, and future councils can
Structure.
change future, I think
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons it's kind of the take it slow approach. And maybe it's up to 3, and we can say, wow, these are 3 great proposals, or increasing, or it's like,
Right.
2 of these are awesome, this last one doesn't seem like what we want around here, and, we can figure, but I'm also hearing, it seems like folks are on the general around 3, up to 3, kind of the zones, maybe there's a swap out grandfather clause on downtown for that place that's there, a community workshop that has sort of hopefully some industry representatives, the state of Maine. And I would say like the folks that are arguing, like, I don't want to see this in my backyard, I don't want to see it around schools, I don't want to see it around here, I think that voice is, it's also, I feel, going to be difficult to, as we can see with the attendance on those workshops that happen and the attendance here tonight, we don't have any members of the public, so there's, you know, it did pass. I feel like a lot of people just, this is a fait accompli. that-
Until we actually have something for them to respond to, that's when people tend to pay attention.
Yeah, I
It's-
think so.
It's still theoretical at this point.
Right.
so.
I think you need to be cautious about saying that you know, the location on Main Street could, here's your license without competing with other applicants. I mean, then you're saying, okay, we're gonna give you a license because you're already a medical facility, so, okay, we're gonna give you a license, no problem.
No, I would say mine's more of a car, like, I wouldn't, yeah, it's up to
I
the
think
council
they'd have
side.
to
I wouldn't
compete just
want
like
one
everybody else.
downtown in Main Street, but one's already here. So if that can be of a higher value and draw tourists in than what it currently is as medical, I could see there being a carve out, but I wouldn't want to see two or, you know, I wouldn't really want to see any recreational cannabis on Main Street in this area. I think it's out of character, but there's already one here. It's a medical piece. There's the paraphernalia, it looks like one, you can see it, so we're not gonna be able to unwind that. But if that one swapped to a rec instead of a medical, it could draw more tourists into our downtown. That's personally what I could
See,
see.
well, whatever you do with it, you really have to deal with that, though. Can they switch, or are they eligible? I mean, that really has to be dealt with
Right.
And are they
now,
interested?
right?
Yeah, to that point, my information might be wrong, I haven't really spent a lot of time investigating it, but it's my understanding that if you have a medical marijuana shop, you can't convert to commercial. And think about it for a second. The place up on Myrick Street, why, if it's now legal, would I want to restrict my customer base by saying you have to have medical marijuana card to be able to access my store? I
It
just
can't
wanna-
be both in the same facility.
It can't be both,
It
okay.
cannot, but you can have them near each other if you wanted to.
Can they switch?
And they can switch.
So-
They could, I mean, it'd be like any business, right? They can say we're no longer a medical cannabis store. Boss Lady Genetics is the name, I believe. So then they switch it, now we're, you know, whatever, Main Street, you know, or marijuana.
Would they then have to meet our new?
But then they'd have to meet
ordinances?
all our new standards, so then they could come in and, to your point, we can have regulations where say you can't display stuff in your windows and they have to be like shaded, so instead of looking at bongs and whatever, you're just looking at a standard looking store and then you go in and you can have all that stuff.
Right. The,
Robert, did you get, I mean, you said these were all sparsely attended workshops, but did Matt pass along any helpful, could you like tease out that the few people that came had a couple issues that we should know about, like they only want to see one or three or?
Not that Matt left.
I think I went to all those workshops and
Nothing
I don't
really.
think anyone said anything.
Yeah, it was all pretty much just the panel speaking to each other.
Yeah, it was like this,
Yeah.
yeah.
This is nice.
what's that, Sarah?
It's nice. I like these guys.
Ray had recommendations, he was pretty much the only person.
That was Ray, okay.
I think there were two other people that they were just interested in knowing what was going on, but Ray had recommendations.
Who is that?
Ray.
Raymond's.
Oh, okay.
Ray Williams was there.
Yeah.
To your point, Nancy, maybe it's once they actually have this is the product, this is where it's gonna be, this is where it could be, that's when
That has
everybody
been my
comes up.
experience in advocacy, is once it becomes real, everybody has opinions, and I don't mean that in an insulting way. Everybody's busy, and we're talking theoretical here, but when we're talking about this is where it's gonna be, and this is how many, and this is what,
Right.
then it's a real thing that people will wanna respond to, so. I think the sooner we get to that point, and again, this is the high-level stuff, and then we narrow in, the sooner we narrow in and let folks know this is the kind of the direction that we're headed, then we'll start getting feedback. Do a lot of people think 3 is too many? Do a lot of people think, what are you talking about, there should be 15? So, the sooner we get that where we think we're headed, the more we'll start getting feedback to tangible proposals.
Yeah, and kind of getting this to the finish line too, I feel like is, you know, we've got a lot of very important things to do. This is, you know, it was voted on by the voters, we should get it there.
Yeah.
But having a ton of workshops on this, really like, you know, this has been voted on by the voters, getting a regulatory framework in place and starting slower to get it off so we can move to some other big things too.
Do we, to that point, Charlie, does everyone, I think, do we all feel good about this as a, you know, this amount of meetings and this timeline? To me, it makes sense. Again, if the next meeting can be get the other stakeholders in, and then basically go from there, like, okay, and now we have one more session like this, and we're like, here's
Here's the
what we're gonna
the RFP
propose,
process.
and
And
let's, planning board, you do your thing, and then send it to us.
And Rob, have you gotten ordinances from other towns that are in existence
Yes.
now? I mean, let's not reinvent the wheel.
Exactly. Keep it simple.
Let's take a look at a couple
Sure.
of those and pick the best parts of.
The one question I had was just July 2nd, what day of the week is that? It's a holiday week, is that?
No, it's not July 2nd, it's the second joint meeting. It's not.
Oh, I took it as
Some-
July
sometime in
2nd as
July.
well.
July 2nd would be the joint meeting, is what I
Right,
read.
sorry.
Me too.
Okay,
Well, this is the first joint session.
you just want to
That's
say
where I
that
was
again.
confused.
Hey, you have to pound those jokes into the ground until they're not funny anymore.
And we're not there yet. I swear we're not there.
Half of you are still smirking when I say it, so.
And we could have a field trip to High Street.
We could.
yeah.
To be blunt, it was.
Oh, jeez. I'm just sad I know what that means.
Steve, you're being awful quiet. Anything you want us to keep in mind as we look towards next steps, or?
This is all free,
I have
Steve, so
plenty
don't
to
worry about it.
say, but how about the two ladies that haven't spoke first?
Oh, I'm so for this, and I love all the ideas tonight. I was kind of thinking when I came in here, how do we get people that are coming in from Bucksport, people that are coming in from Bangor, 4 million people that pass through here. And I love the idea of making, being able to have that control to make that landowner or have someone be able to build up there on Myrick Street sounds incredible. I love the idea of switching over this shop here on Main Street to a recreational one if they wanted that to be, to get more people in the downtown area. I'm all for this.
Cool.
Great ideas.
I think, yeah, I think the other side of attracting people to Main Street though is something to consider though, is, if you put one on Main Street in, the downtown business area, there's the certain people that are dead set against it, and is that driving those tourists, those residents out of downtown?
I just feel like it's already here, even though they might not, those people aren't using that medicinally, especially if the idea of making the ordinance where you can't see in, you can't see that paraphernalia in the window, that it even makes it less of an issue, potentially.
We also have a main street with several drinking establishments that if people were turned off by, it would be an impact already.
Yep.
So,
I'm
I mean,
kinda-
it's, like it said, thinking through all the possibilities of what could go right and what could go wrong is appropriate.
I'm kind of with you, John. If it wasn't there already, like we already have that. I was just over there. There's paraphernalia.
Yeah.
There's this and that. So it's like we actually just might be able to regulate it better, and it'd be a higher value.
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's what kind of got me off of the. Yeah, no downtowns. Like, all right,
It was
there already
my
is there.
persuasive argument.
It also was you. It was also you.
It's gotta be a reason I came here tonight.
But Tammy, a little on the opposite end, maybe.
Well, when I first came in, I was not sure if I'm really for this, and I keep going back and forth, to the time of Prohibition, when alcohol was being introduced and, not knowing all the things, and so I kind of switched over, and at first I said, well, I just think that we need one, but now we've had more conversation, and I do feel like 2, 3, it might be pushing it just a little bit for me personally. And I am actually for higher licensing fees, sorry, Steve, just because I do think that they bring in a lot of revenue. And at first, when this came out, and the state had approved, or was going to the voters for recreational marijuana, they had said at one point that this, municipalities, if you had recreational marijuana, it was going to bring in a ton of revenue, and then I was like, that's not gonna happen. So I just would like to see some higher, maybe not 15, 25,000, but I do feel like we probably need to increase that amount just a little bit, because I do think that we need to bring in a little bit more revenue. At this point, that's all I have right now. Did you want more, Steve?
Oh, yeah. So, I guess, first of all, this collaborative discussion is very helpful for me and everybody here, I think. It's not a joint session, it's a collaborative discussion. And first, and secondly, I would like to see the exact wording, because I can't remember the exact wording on the referendum question. Did we ask if we wanted establishments? Did we want, yeah, I'd like to see that at the next meeting. What was on that referendum question? Was it, do we allow recreational cannabis? Was it limited? I'd like to know that for the next meeting.
I mean, it was just limited to the recreational.
Just recreational cannabis establishments, so just the.
Establishments?
So just the storefronts, just where you can go purchase.
Not manufacturing.
Not
Right,
manufacturing,
no,
not cultivation.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying, does it say an establishment or does it say an establishments? So did the people approve plural or singular? That's my question. Secondly, or thirdly, last election was a record turnout because it was a presidential election, okay? I voted against this because it's just not my thing. As a citizen, I voted against it when I went to the ballot. But 55% of the people said they want it. Therefore, we need it. Whether I like it or not, it's a different story. It's here to stay. This industry has popped up legally in what, 15 years, 12 years, 10 years? I don't know how long it's been, but it's been relatively, it's been pushed a long time, and all of a sudden it came to fruit that we all were gonna have to deal with it. And that's what we're here tonight for, is to deal with it, okay? And it's here to stay. Cigarette shops, I don't think everyone sells cigarettes at their convenience stores, and eventually that's what's gonna happen. Maybe we won't see it in 10 years, but it's gonna be a principle in the daily lives of people to pick up their alcohol, cigarettes, or marijuana, whatever it might be. Even though I'm against the subject, and I voted against it on a personal level, 55% wants it, therefore we need it. I don't like the idea of market restraints, and here's what I don't like about market restraints. If we start limiting the number of businesses, now again, I don't like this idea, but people wanted it. If we start regulating how many businesses that we have, it's capping the market and restraining the market. At what point do you say Main Street's got too many restaurants? We're not gonna have any more restaurants. I don't think that we as a city should be making those decisions. I think it should be a free market system. And the citizens have voted to bring it to town. So therefore, restricting the markets, let the free market work. I don't like the idea, because I'm not a favor of this pot thing. But they voted for it. If it says establishments, it's establishments, and I don't think we should tinker with the free market system. If we start tinkering with the free market system of marijuana, then why aren't we doing it with alcohol? Why aren't we doing it with restaurants? We're letting our personal opinions get involved. And I don't think that's healthy, to tinker with the free market system when the citizens have voted that they want it. Thank you.
Very blunt in his comments. No, these are good points.
I wonder if alcohol establishments did start out that way. Because we're not saying forever only 3, it's like there's a lot here. So phase in, it's a good point to consider, but this is also a really unique product that's being sold.
There's also the state only issues so many licensed liquor stores that can sell hard alcohol. So I think I was typing
Oh,
it
right.
out, and I think there's only 6 in Ellsworth. You get Hannaford, Shaw's, Global.
That's
friends and
interesting.
family.
Yeah.
I think there's only 6.
Yeah, I put this like in the middle zone between hard liquor and casinos.
Right,
You
right,
could let the
so-
market attack that, casinos and gambling, and say it's like a sin, tax in some ways, and I would never judge that. I don't think it should be illegal. But it also can change the character of towns. I've seen it. When you just have pot shops everywhere. So, to me, who's usually a pretty free market guy and is about to end go on an ordinance review consultant and hopefully partners with Mr. O'Halloran on pulling some pieces back, and the planning board maybe. This one I feel like take it slow, but there is a point to that, Steve, on just in terms of total valuation increases in the city. If you did just let a lot more pot shops in, that might be a lot more valuation increase.
We
I
have
hate to see it, but I'm not gonna fight it on something that, I just think the free market system is always the best plan.
The other end of that is, do we have a responsibility as a town to kind of curate what this town is? Bar Harbor does it with their light pollution. You can't have a light in your business that points a certain angle and is below a certain Kelvin temperature. Like, it needs to be a warm enough light, or else you start getting light pollution. I don't know, there's a whole department behind it regulating it. We don't have that here, but
I thought we
we
did.
don't. I don't
We
think
have
The dark skies are
regulation on
different.
light, but nothing like they do.
No, it's
Oh, we do have
incredible.
some level.
Yeah.
Somebody told me once that what they love about, reminds them of their childhood in Ellsworth, is coming back and you can see the lights from
Yeah.
the city, and that was.
Glowing like the panels.
But then you have some folks that are like, no lights, and I have visitors come to me and they're like, why are there no lights anywhere?
So you can see the stars.
So you can see the stars.
It's our responsibility to listen to the people who say the skies are too bright and we need to make sure that they're not, or the people that say
Yeah.
Cardbrook is getting polluted and should we carve out this area that, allows for only this development to protect. Or if not, it's just everybody comes in and does exactly what's best for them, which is great, but, tragedy of the commons is real, and that's what I think a city should do. But there's a balance for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, Steve.
So, related to this conversation, and when we're looking at questions to bring for a workshop, I would be interested in what has happened where there's been a lot of shops. Are they all still open? What is the state seeing for closures? If the market, there's gangbusters at the beginning, what about 4 years out? Are they still growing, or is the market responding and they're closing, so that bump in valuation and such for the city, if we let in as many as one, it might be very short term, and then we're left with skeletons that we've got to deal with.
Questions for the OCP, probably.
Yeah, well, if somebody's gathering up questions for that, I'd love to know what the,
I mean, I'm not so sure that, let's say we're gonna have 3 establishments. I'm not so sure those 3 businesses are gonna pop up brand new stores. Their first choice is gonna find an existing store that would work. So I think, if you're looking at this from a property tax windfall, I would caution you not to.
Yeah.
My understanding, to Nancy's point though, is that in certain areas of the state, there has been a glut, and the price that is per pound or whatever is really.
Pound.
Yeah.
Per pound?
Gram.
at least I know.
You
that
are a
that's
super
lot.
shopper.
That's how you get the deals. Go to Costco.
So that's the next, so if the
I
price is
think, I
going
think,
down, the
I think
next
there's
step is
been a
gonna be
lot, I think the
closures.
price has gone down.
Yeah.
Because there is, healthy.
Yeah.
Or, kind of a saturation, but a lot of competition, but, I don't know, I think it's, if we let it everywhere, is it a race to the bottom, or, I don't know, but I think having the state regulators, and then having the industry, I would, having someone from the industry say, like, here's what we've seen, here's what we're noticing, we actually think it'd be great if you only, I don't know what they'd say, but maybe they say, actually, we find it's best to limit the amount.
Yeah.
Because there's been that's beyond my knowledge, but I think the more we know, the better.
And to your point, John, I think you're right. The property tax windfall is not enormous. There'll probably be a little bit of fee, because you're not, unless you did we're gonna give one, and, and we're gonna essentially ensure that it gets onto Myrick Street, even though that would be a high price, but that entrant might be willing to pay that high price to get shovels in the ground at WS that could inspire a Chick-fil-A next to it and some other pieces. Unless you went that model, of like, we really want to see shovels in WS in that area because we haven't seen it for 10 years. And so we can use that fact that there's heavy demand to get a store here to do that. But if you have 2 or 3, you're going to go for your lowest build cost, and that's not going to be enormous. It'll probably be somewhat of an up value, but you're going to lose. Or you go to Steve's piece if you're, and just let the market decide, and there's 15 pot shops here, and they've increased value here, and now they're competing with each other to be the coolest looking one that people are going to. There might be some bigger valuation increases on that side of things.
Clarify on that, I'm not for that, but I'm not gonna segment my decision. I think the free market in all enterprises is the way to go. I'm sorry it's this one, but the voters said 55% they wanted it, so it's coming.
And this is very different. I've done some national level research on this, on how these markets work state by state, and they really vary a lot. I think there was this initial idea that the black market would disappear once we start legalizing that, and Canada's got some interesting research because Canada was the first to do a lot of this, and that has not happened because the free market has a regulatory environment, and the black market does not, so actually it helped lower the price of the black market cannabis to be easier because people can just go directly to your house, and as opposed to having to sell in the store and to have it be tested and to have these other things. So, and in New York City, there's just like pot shops everywhere. They have regulations for it, they have illegal, but there's just not enough police law enforcement to shut down the illegal pot shops that are everywhere. So you can kind of create recreational cannabis, and then you create these sort of, it's harder to predict. And then also there's a problem of price, like in the initial entrance to the market when the price is high, those entrants are actually making a decent profit. But as more and more players get involved and it starts driving the price down, you're making most of your money as those organizations in your first 2, 3, 4 years of opening. And then once the other players are there, your price to compete with the black market is just, your prices aren't low, your margins decrease after 4 or 5 years. And then in like Colorado, they're having a lot of stores like now go defunct. Like any new organization, the expectations just didn't quite meet. We're seeing this with the breweries in a way too. Breweries had a kind of peak brewery, and so, and then Maine versus Massachusetts, we have a different regulatory environment. Like Massachusetts offered, I think the cities get a little bit of a cut. So when they legalized it, same exact year, and they came out further. They're in most cities and towns. Now in Maine, they're like incentivizing cities to, I think they offered, that's part of the process, is they're offering us to like reimburse the cost of this meeting. So that the market, there's just not enough, why are there, with 4 million tourists coming in through here, why are there not a lot of pot shops? Because it's just not a huge financial windfall for the city to spend all the time in regulatory. So it's a huge question mark on that, Nancy, for like what it looks like in 10 years in Ellsworth.
And what we want it to look like.
Right.
I think this is beyond the scope of this meeting, but I just want to put it out there so somebody who knows more about this than I do, maybe Patrick does, I don't know. But Steve, actually, we chatted the other day, you brought up Delta 9 THC, which is a interesting thing. Do you know much about it, Patrick?
It's synthetic, right?
Yeah, and
technically it skirts the Schedule 1 designation, so.
It's made from hemp, which is classified as non-cannabis from the 2018 federal farm law. So like, it's made from that with a little bit of synthetic tinkering, and so you've got this psychoactive THC product that is very potent in small amounts, and it's now in like gummies and whatever, and showing up, and it's not federally regulated, or it's federally. Yeah, it's regulated like hemp seeds might be, where you can sell them in the health food shop or in a liquor store or whatever. So you see these a lot in Florida, and I've seen them in a couple shops in this area as well now. So something to think about. There are cities and states that have started to regulate it, but it's funny. It should be looked into.
Yeah, I think if anything, it's better to have the regulated cannabis businesses, because it would decrease the demand for these. It's like a pseudo black market product, even though it's legal. And yeah, so I think it's a little beyond this conversation, but I think it does go to the value of having, people are using the substances, let's regulate it and try to make it as safe as possible.
Yeah, I think Ellsworth kind of has that tourist kind of piece too, is coming here to go to somewhere that's legal. You're not gonna buy a medical card or, you know, that, but those types of people are here already. It might draw them in.
Yeah. You don't have a dealer up here, you're just visiting, so you gotta go to a legit place.
Great.
Feels like we made progress.
I think so. I think so. We'll get that next, I think everybody's lined in the schedule. We'll get those, see, we'll do our best to get some of those groups out here for it, and then work to getting an initial regulatory kind of framework based on those conversations, and so that council can actually get final edits here.
And I think a specific invitation to the Ellsworth Chamber and the Ellsworth Business Group, just so that they're
Yeah.
weighing in from their perspectives at that point.
Trying to figure like who would be like, just to have that voice here. I don't even know who that'd be. Maybe I'll just be that voice.
You can be the prankster, is that?
Cranks,
you're gonna
don't
be
you
the-
do it. Not
you
in
can be
my
the crotchety.
city hall.
Yeah, we all take turns with that, so maybe it's your turn.
There we go.
Cool.
Could invite faith organizations, you know, I mean, if we're talking about, or schools, you know, or just let people know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and make sure they understand the setbacks and that we're taking
Yeah.
that seriously. Nobody's talked about not doing that.
Yeah.
And then Mike-
Hey, Steve, you call this meeting to order, you gonna adjourn it?
Yes, Steve?
Please
I
go ahead.
move to adjourn.
All right, so moved and approved.